Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. A detailed account of a serial killer's life and crime in the grim annals of American criminal history. Few names stand as ominously as that of Gary Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer. This notorious figure held the chilling distinction of being one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. He was responsible for the deaths of at least 49 women in the state of Washington, though the true number may be higher. His story is one not just of brutality, but of a criminal mastermind who evaded capture for decades. His crimes and the subsequent investigation into his activities shocked the nation and left the community of Seattle reeling for years. This video will dive deep into Gary Ridgway's life, his crimes, and the investigation that eventually led to his capture. We will explore the intricacies of his psychological profile, the details of his killings, his interactions with law enforcement, and the aftermath of his arrest. So, buckle up, as we take you through one of the most disturbing true crime cases in history. Early life of Gary Leon Ridgway. Gary Leon Ridgway was born on February 18, 1949, in Salt Lake City, Utah, to Thomas and Mary Ridgway. His father was a bus driver and his mother worked as a waitress. Gary grew up in a household that, by all accounts, was relatively uneventful, though later reports would paint his family dynamic in a more disturbing light. His mother, according to some reports, was emotionally distant, often expressing disgust towards Gary and his younger brother. Ridgway himself described his mother as domineering and critical, often belittling him. From a young age, Ridgway exhibited signs of troubling behavior. He was reportedly fascinated with fire and had an unhealthy obsession with dead animals. His behavior would become increasingly antisocial as he entered adolescence. It was during this time that Ridgway began to experience a deep-seated hatred for women, which would later manifest in his horrific crimes. Ridgway attended Evergreen High School in Seattle, Washington, where he was known to be a quiet and socially awkward teenager. Despite his struggles with academics and socialization, Ridgway did well enough to graduate and eventually enlisted in the U.S. Navy. After serving a short stint in the Navy, Ridgway returned to Seattle, where he began to work at a variety of jobs, including as a truck painter. Psychological profile. Gary Ridgway's psychological makeup was one of the key factors that allowed him to elude capture for so long. He was intelligent, meticulous, and patient, traits that helped him conceal his crimes for decades. Ridgway was a man who could blend into society effortlessly, presenting himself as an ordinary, law-abiding citizen while secretly harboring a dark and violent side. Ridgway's early encounters with women were marked by his violent fantasies. He once claimed that he fantasized about killing women as early as his teenage years. These fantasies evolved into his first attempts at murder, though they were unsuccessful. Ridgway later admitted to killing his first victim in the early 1980s, a woman he had picked up off the streets. What made Ridgway particularly dangerous was his ability to detach himself from his emotions. He was a man who viewed women as disposable objects, often picking up prostitutes, having sex with them, and then killing them. His ability to compartmentalize his emotions allowed him to carry out his crimes without any outward signs of remorse or guilt. Additionally, Ridgway was an obsessive-compulsive individual, known to be meticulous in his planning and execution. He chose his victims based on certain characteristics. Most were sex workers or women living on the fringes of society. This made it difficult for law enforcement to pinpoint a pattern early on in the investigation. The crime Gary Ridgway's killing spree began in 1982 and continued for nearly 2 decades. His method of murder was disturbingly consistent. He would typically pick up his victims, often from the streets of Seattle, where he would proposition them for sex. Ridgway's victims were mostly women, many of whom were involved in prostitution or were runaway teenagers. Once he lured them into his vehicle, he would strangle them with his hands or ligatures, often leaving their bodies in remote locations, typically near the Green River in Washington state. Ridgway's choice of victims was strategic. He targeted women who were already marginalized, which he believed would make it easier to avoid detection. Most of his victims were prostitutes, drug addicts, or women who had fallen through the cracks of society. This made it difficult for the police to connect the dots between the disappearances, as many of the women were considered disposable by the general public and law enforcement alike. The Green River Killer earned his name due to the discovery of several of his victims' bodies near the Green River, a waterway in Washington state. These early victims were often found in remote, wooded areas, and their bodies were often in varying stages of decomposition. Some were left partially clothed, while others were found naked. Ridgway took great care to hide the bodies, and many remained undiscovered for years. Ridgway's killings followed a specific pattern. He would often visit the same areas to dispose of the bodies, and his method of murder was relatively consistent: strangulation. He would sometimes engage in sexual acts with the bodies post-mortem, further deepening the grotesque nature of his crimes. The investigation in the Green River Killer case became one of the largest and most complex investigations in U.S. history. The search for the killer spanned several years, with investigators initially focusing on a variety of potential suspects. However, the case took a turn in 1984 when the body of a woman named Marie Malvar was found near the Green River. This discovery marked the beginning of a connection between the murders. Despite years of investigation, Ridgway managed to avoid detection. The police were faced with a plethora of suspects, and there were numerous dead ends. Ridgway, however, was able to evade capture due to his ability to blend into society and his apparent lack of remorse. In 2001, a breakthrough came in the form of DNA evidence. The authorities had collected DNA samples from several of the crime scenes, but it wasn't until the advent of advanced genetic testing techniques that they were able to link Ridgway to the murders. DNA from the Green River victims was matched to Ridgway's saliva, which was obtained through a routine cheek swab. Gary Ridgway was arrested in November 2001, nearly 20 years after the first body was discovered. He was charged with the murders of 48 women, though he later confessed to killing 71 women in total. The confession and trial following his arrest, Ridgway was interrogated by law enforcement officials, and it was during these interrogations that he confessed to his crimes. His confession was chilling in its detail. Ridgway admitted to picking up women, often taking them to secluded locations, and strangling them. He showed little emotion during the confession, revealing his complete lack of empathy for his victims. In 2003, Gary Ridgway pled guilty to 48 counts of murder in exchange for a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. This plea deal spared him the death penalty, but it also allowed him to avoid the scrutiny of a public trial. Ridgway's sentencing was a bittersweet victory for the families of his victims, who had spent years searching for answers. Aftermath. Gary Ridgway is currently serving his life sentence at the Washington State Penitentiary. He is held in protective custody due to the nature of his crimes. Ridgway's case has been the subject of numerous documentaries, books, and studies, as criminologists and psychologists continue to analyze his motives and behavior. In the years since his conviction, Ridgway has been somewhat cooperative with law enforcement, providing additional details about his crimes. He has shown little to no remorse, often stating that he was just trying to get rid of them, and doing society a favor. His lack of empathy and his ability to compartmentalize his crimes have made him an object of fascination for many experts in the field of criminal psychology. Conclusion of his story. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, remains one of the most disturbing figures in the world of true crime. His reign of terror, which spanned nearly 2 decades, left a trail of victims and broken families in its wake. Though he is behind bars today, the investigation into his crimes continues to offer chilling insights into the mind of one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history. Gary Ridgway's story serves as a grim reminder of the dangers of complacency and the vulnerability of marginalized individuals in society. His ability to evade capture for so long, combined with his methodical and detached approach to murder, paints a haunting portrait of a man who, for decades, eluded justice. If you found this video on Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, insightful and chilling, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll get access to more deep dives into true crime cases, investigations, and the stories that continue to haunt our history. Click on the bell icon so you never miss a new upload from Plunge into Crime. If you're as fascinated by the psychology behind these real-life criminals as we are, join our growing community of crime enthusiasts. Got thoughts, theories, or questions? Drop them in the comments below. We love hearing from our subscribers and engaging in discussions. Stay tuned for more true crime content coming your way.